Hello, my name is Nick Watts, and thank you for taking time to watch this video about debate. Today we'll be debating over this topic. Should developing nations prioritize environmental protection over economic development? There's no doubt that environmental problems are looming against us in the status quo, or in the current times. Many have seen the impacts and felt the impacts of global warming already, and have noted that major changes are happening environmentally in the world, such as the polar ice caps melting and increasing the sea level. Likewise, the change globally in the environment has made recent storms and hurricanes even worse than they have been in the past, and risk increasing the devastation that those storms will do in the future. Likewise, many have noted that the reason why the environment is so damaged today is largely due to processes of industrialization. Air pollution, for example, is currently a big issue in countries like China, which are burning massive amounts of fossil fuels, such as coal and gasoline, in order to fuel their industrialization, or the increasing amount of factories, for example, in the country. Now, this debate, however, is about developing nations' roles. Developing nations are those nations that are not modern yet, such as many nations in Africa. So, the question of this debate will largely be one of responsibility. Is it fair for developing nations to have to prioritize environmental protection over economic development because of the harm that already industrialized nations have done to the planet? Well, let's see. Michael starts us off in this debate by giving the first constructive and argues that the greatest threats currently are environmental. He cites global warming and other sources of environmental damage, such as air pollution in parts of China, as sources for concern, and argues that developing nations must prioritize environmental protection. Otherwise, they risk becoming just as polluted in their air as China is currently. However, Denise is his opposition and is arguing that this debate will come down to one of responsibility, and that it is not fair for developing nations to have to take the lead on environmental protection when they were not responsible for the reason why global warming is such a big problem today. Michael continues his argumentation in his first rebuttal that says that it is a simple fact that environmental problems are the greatest risk facing the planet today, and that even if it's unfair, developing nations must prioritize the protection of their environment. Otherwise, they risk eventually doing the same harm as already industrialized nations. Denise, his opposition, continues with her arguments about responsibility and argues that if Michael is correct in that it is unfair, then the burden should be placed on already developed nations to share with developing nations more environmentally friendly ways to industrialize. It costs a lot of money in order to create and invent environmentally friendly ways to industrialize. And since Denise has proven that this debate is about responsibility, she argues that those developing countries should simply put their economic development as their top priority, because anything else would be unfair, and that it's up to developed nations to ensure and aid those developing countries to make sure that they do not make the same environmental mistakes that countries like the United States and China are currently making. Denise was the winner of this debate because Denise was able to bring nuance to this debate and complicate the issue for Michael. Denise's arguments about responsibility ultimately frame my decision, or tell me as the judge what the most central question of this debate is. Denise was able to prove that even if Michael is right, and that developing nations need to take into account environmental protection, that it should be up to developed nations that already have the technology to industrialize in an environmentally friendly way and share that with developing nations. This is an important argument because it allows Denise to take away much of Michael's arguments and use them as support for her position on this topic. Ultimately, Denise was able to prove that even though environmental problems are a big concern globally today, that developing nations should not be held responsible and should not pay economic price of the devastation that already developed nations have done to the planet. Thanks for watching. Bye.